I think the mystics and sages and luminaries of the world, whether it's in a religious tradition or if it's in philosophy, going back across time and no matter where you look on the planet, they come to the same conclusion that people want to live purposeful lives with meaning. And that's an investment in self and an investment in others.
You are your own greatest ally or enemy. Awaken the warrior within you. Take charge of your inner kingdom. Welcome to the Warrior Growth Academy podcast.
Welcome to the Warrior Growth Academy podcast, where we build our mental strength, not only to survive, but to thrive in this world. In order to thrive, we need a certain level of well-being. And we all want to be happy in this life. So the next guest is someone who has studied and teach this specific subject: empathy, human relationships, how we function, what can we do more of and what can we do less of in order to experience this beautiful emotion, which is the connection to oneself, the connection to others, and also just experience more joy in life. Anita Nowak, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here.
Me too. Before we dive in, you just shared with me a story. Would you mind saying it again? Because I think it's really beautiful, and I think I wouldn't start the podcast otherwise. Do you want or not?
Yeah, which story? I know that we're going to edit this out, but which story?
The story, Dominican Republic. Oh. And there's going to be no edits. This is raw, uncut.
For real? Is this? No, huh? What? There is no edit?
No, I'm kidding.
Oh. Okay. Yeah, happy to tell you this story. This really happened to me after a very heartbreaking breakup. I wanted to get away. I just needed to disappear under some sun. And none of my friends were available, so I was just like, screw it, I'm going to book myself a flight. I've traveled alone. I can handle a resort by myself. So here I was in the Dominican Republic, sort of healing from a broken heart, which was actually a rebound. So it was a rebound and a broken heart of the rebound and the first original breakup.
Oh, Lord.
So I'm on the beach. It's a beautiful day. I've set up shop, I've got my towel and reading and music and just going to rest. And a crew sets up a photo shoot in the ocean. And I'm watching them. I'm like, oh, yeah, this is like a Sports Illustrated swimsuit edition photograph. And I'm watching the model, and they've got all of the gear and the lighting and everything. And I'm just feeling butterflies in my stomach saying, you know what? It's never going to happen that I'm like 50 feet away from this setup. I should be bold enough to go over and ask them if they'd take a few shots of me, because I'm never going to be this young, and just sort of like have these photographs of me in the ocean. So I catch my courage. I go over to the crew. And I said, hey, listen, I'm so devastated from a breakup, but this would really lift my spirits. Could you take just 2 or 3 shots and send them by email, like no touch-ups, nothing? And they looked at each other and they said, wir haben zu viel zu tun, which is a German crew, and translated into English was, we have too much to do. And I was kind of devastated. I walked away dejected, and I was like, yeah, okay, I guess they're really busy and they're on a timeline, I get it. But like, I was being super vulnerable in that moment, saying like, you could help me heal my broken heart. And they didn't. So I keep that in my mind when I come across friends in my life, or especially my daughter, my husband, when they need my attention, even when I'm like in the grind, never to say, not right now, I'm too busy. Sometimes it'll happen, but I'm always trying to remember that if there's a really big need, that you can just put away your phone, put away your laptop, and just be present with somebody just for a few minutes to feel what they need to, say. It can make all the difference. So.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's the story.
Thank you for sharing, because, this is, I felt this was as much funny story from, the context and kind of the opportunity that you jumped on it. So it was also beautiful from that perspective, but also on kind of the lesson that you took away from that. And I think that's the beauty of life, is we have all those little moments of lessons that often we don't even take the time to even realize we just had a lesson on a golden platter handed to us that then can change our behaviors in future moments.
And one of the biggest gifts we can give someone is our presence. People know when you're looking over their shoulder at a cocktail party. People know if they're like worried about the time. But if you can sit with somebody and hold space and really be present with them, I mean, listen, there's a famous Maya Angelou quote that goes something like, people will forget what you say, people will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel. And I think that presence is letting somebody know that you care.
Absolutely. Talking about presence, not really actually, but in a way, yes. I've had the huge honor to go to one of your classes lately, and I've seen you in action. And as much as I knew you from real life, and I knew you had a lot of passion, a lot of positive things to share, I really saw, you know, Anita, the teacher, and if I'm not mistaken, you've even won like some awards of Teacher of the Year, and like this is the equivalent of the Oscars in the teacher world. So still, you gotta, you know, throw some flowers. What are the main things you want your students to remember from your classes?
Great question. So I had a mentor by the name of Jim. He died a few years ago, and I didn't grow up with grandparents on either side. So I remember meeting him. He was celebrating his 50th class reunion from graduating from college, from McGill. So he's already way into his 70s when I met him. And so when I was seated next to him at this formal luncheon for the McGill Alumni Association, I was rolling my eyes in my head thinking, oh God, I'm going to be next to this dude that's going to be super boring. But that's again because I didn't have grandparents and I didn't realize how cool old people could be. So we got to chatting, and he was an extraordinary man, and I kind of adopted him as my pseudo-grandfather, and luckily he was in my life for nearly 15 years before he passed. And he used to say to me when we would get together and I'd talk to him about like my professional career, my personal life, or whatever was going on, he would always say to me, Anita, just don't forget, you are better than you think you are. And he wasn't saying I was better than anybody else, but he's like, don't forget, you are better than you think you are. And just hold that. And so because that was so helpful to me, I started doing that in my classes. So this is how I started. I'd put up the letters of the words, you are better than you think you are. I jumbled them all up, and then on one slide, without the word breaks, I just had a set of letters. And that was the slide. And I would give the students in my class a minute to decode it, and nobody would. And then I would change the slide, and they would be able to read, you are better than you think you are. And over time, I realized I could actually 10x that. And now what I actually do on the first day of class and the last day of class is I'll still give them the 1-minute contest, because kids like to compete. And then I'll walk around the class, and I will crouch down. I mean, by the end of it, I'm like, my muscles, what are these called? The quads are like shaking. I'll go down to eye level where they're seated, and I'll look at them and I'll say, you are better than you think you are. And I'll stay with that student, and then I'll move to the next one, and then I'll move to the next one. And I invite the students who are watching to see if they are rolling their eyes in their minds or how they're reacting. Some students will wiggle in their chairs. Some people drop the class. I can be honest about that because they're like, whoa, that's weird. But by the time we get to the end of the semester, because some of what I believe is important in a classroom, regardless of subject, right? You could be teaching chemistry or physics or neurobiology or mathematics. It doesn't matter. I think the privilege, the honor of being a teacher in a classroom is allowing students to feel positive about themselves, to feel agency, to feel excited about their lives and where they are going. And I think so many young people are growing up with full-on anxiety about not only climate change, but what are they going to do with their careers, all of the social media pressures on like how they have to keep up with the Joneses. There's just so much insecurity. So I think the classroom is a great place to remind students. And I'll tell you, by the end of the semester, when I do that again, I've got students that are like welling up with tears because I think it's something that can be repeated every day and it still sounds sweet to your ears. Yakub, you are better than you think you are. Everybody who's watching or listening, you are better than you think you are. I've got little goosebumps talking about it. Like, we can own that. And I think I'll just add one other thing. I know it's getting on a long answer to your question, but I really believe that we are part of everything that's living. Everything that got created. There's some generative, creative, mysterious spirit that runs through all of us. And when I say you are better than you think you are, it's because we are part of that lineage of everything that ever got created. So you can take that to a spiritual place, you could take that to a self-empowerment place, but it's like, you know, that famous quote by Mariam Williamson, we are not afraid of the darkness, we're afraid of the light, yeah? The light that exists in all of us.
Wow. And what do you think led to us believing that we are less than we are?
Oh, there's a lot of social conditioning. I mean, certainly our brains were designed to protect us. Okay, so we've got the amygdala, the reptilian brain in the back of at the base of our brain, that's there to monitor anything that seems suspect, suspicious, possibly a threat to our well-being. And our brain can't tell the difference if that's a physical threat or if that's an emotional threat. And right now in 2024, we're not walking around with a lot of physical threats. We are afraid of the debt that we're in. We're afraid of being rejected. We're afraid that we're not living up to people's expectations. And there are too many messages all day long that is telling us and firing up our amygdala that we don't belong here and we don't deserve to belong. And so I think that really, like, over many, many, many days, weeks, months, and years of living, especially in a socially mediated, saturated environment, where everybody's just trying to sell you stuff all the time to fill in this hole, that's where it's coming from, I think.
Makes a lot of sense. And how do you think now, let's say someone hears this, or one of your students likes the message that they are better than they think they are. What's next to do to kind of move forward and probably build up that belief and start acting on it?
Well, I spent many, many years doing a PhD and in the faculty of education. So I truly believe in the power of education. But I think formal education is incredibly limited. I think elementary school, high school, post-secondary school is really now a funnel for getting a job in the world. And I don't think that's the highest calling of what education can do. I think we are born with innate gifts, all of us. And I think it's the missing piece is that we're not reminded that the goal of life is for us to be everything we can be. That's what education is meant to do, is meant to open up and hold a mirror to say, hey, look at all these amazing qualities you have. Look at all these skills that you have. Imagine if you developed those. We're so busy, pointing out our faults and our, wounded selves and our shadow selves, and we think that that's where we have to live. We have to improve X, Y, Z. No, we have to recognize what our calling is, recognize what our gifts are, and allow that to flourish. So my answer to your question is, get real about educating yourself. Get real about going on a journey. I mean, I remember my own path to my own journey of education. I was studying business, okay? So I wanted to be this hotshot ad exec. I still have these memories of wanting to wear this vampire red lipstick and walk around with these heels and stilettos and a beautiful Gucci handbag and walk into an office tower and have these fancy lunch meetings. I mean, that's what I wanted, right? And in the last year of my degree, my roommate, who's now an orthopedic surgeon in New York, he was dating a woman that was part of a film festival. And it was a feminist film festival. I'd never heard of the word feminism before, which is a little bit now in retrospect what? Anyways, so I get dragged to this film festival one night and I'm watching a movie about the plight of women around the world. Women had come to the United Nations. It was a human rights conference in Vienna for 5 days. One day was devoted to women's human rights, and women from around the world were testifying about what was going on in their country. And I'm sitting in the theater completely gobsmacked. I'd never heard of female genital cutting before. I'd never heard of women being buried to their shoulders and stoned to death, and that the size of the stone was on paper. This is the right size because too small would take too long to kill the woman, too big would go too fast. Like, I'd never heard of girls being trafficked as sex slaves. So I walked out of that theater and I was completely enraged, not only by the content that I was watching, but I was enraged by the fact that I was graduating from one of the best universities in Canada, in the world, and I had not come across this. And that film set me on a completely different trajectory where I was like, hey, you know what? Like, how come I don't know this stuff? And I'm a woman. Half of the world are women. And how come this is not part of like common conversation and we should be doing something about this? And so I started to read about women's issues, and one book led to another book, led to another book, until I eventually did an entire master's on how women are represented in the media. And that I just have given myself permission to pursue things that are of interest to me. And I never feel like I'm working a day in my life because I'm always excited about what I'm learning. So anybody who's interested, anybody who's saying like, oh, I want a bit of that, like, okay, good. Take some courses, see where that leads you, follow your bliss and make it a priority. Forget about what everybody else is up to. Do what you want to pursue.
For example, for someone who didn't yet have a moment of realization like this, I think, if I'm not mistaken, it's called a catalyst moment, right?
Yeah.
How else can we kind of be guided more towards something that will feel like not working a day in your life? Because I think everyone wants that. I think it's kind of this concept in the air. This is the kind of the dream, but it sounds so far-fetched. Sometimes it sounds so far.
Yeah.
So how, if you know,
Yeah.
right? And probably this is not a definitive and only answer. There's probably different ways to approach it. But what would you say to someone who didn't live that moment, but wants, that feeling?
Yeah. I call it the unlearning that needs to happen. So whatever you've learned in your life is a result of the family you grew up in the community you grew up in, and the friends that have influenced your way of thinking. You have a worldview based on all of that. And you need to challenge that worldview by unlearning some stuff. And I think there's a few ways you can unlearn. I think one of the best ways is to travel. Travel to a really different place in a really different context, and don't make it about the Instagram photos that you can take. Make it about meeting people outside of your worldview. I mean, I have a memory of being in Iran, okay? I was on a bus, and I sit at right behind the bus driver if I can, because I get a bit of a bellyache if I'm all the way at the back. I was reading a book, and across the aisle were these two women, sisters, and I was sitting by myself on my side, and she saw that I was reading, and she's like, hey, do you mind if we practice our English? And I'm like, no, not at all. And so she came over and we chatted for a little bit. And then the sisters swapped and we chatted for a little bit, like 20 minutes apiece. It was really lovely. And at the end, they're like, okay, well, we're going to get to our destination in about 5 or 6 hours and you'll stay with us when we get there. And I thought she was kind of joking, right? So we arrive many hours later after dozing off a little bit. And I get off the bus and I'm waiting to catch my little suitcase. And I see that my suitcase is with a guy walking away. And I'm like, hey, that's my suitcase. Like, I'm trying to run after him. And the two sisters catch up to me and they said, no, it's my brother or my husband. I don't remember. You're staying with us for a couple of days. And I was like, oh, okay, I guess so. And I took the risk of just staying with perfect strangers for 2 nights. And I can't even tell. And this was in a city called Yazd. And it's where the Zoroastrian flame exists perpetually. And it goes up to 50 degrees centigrade in the summertime. I was there in the month of February, so it wasn't hot. But they've developed this underground system that has natural flows of air that in the summertime you don't even need electrical air conditioning. And I went to the markets and I ate amazing food. I danced in their living rooms. Like none of that would have happened. And I have got so many anecdotes of amazing things that have happened on my travels. So go into debt, I say to my students, because that's the biggest ROI you'll ever get is to travel. So one, and then two is read long form books. I think long form books have gotten out of style because everything is like fast and 12 minutes is long, 2 minutes is long. Like who's got time, to watch a 2-minute video? Crazy. Like we gotta take some time to read good quality books. And you can easily, ask Google, ask ChatGPT, post on whatever, say like, what book has changed your life, and get 50 books and make the decision of one a week. You read every morning, you make it part of your life. It will blow your mind what opens up for you.
Is there a book that changed your life?
Oh yeah, totally.
What was it?
Yeah. So, okay, there's a few. Daring Greatly by Brené Brown. I had a job where I was reporting to a boss that was a risk-averse micromanager. And I am like an entrepreneurial bull in a china shop, like want to make shit happen, right? Can I say that?
Yeah. Raw and uncut.
Yeah. And after working for him for, I guess, about close to 2 years, I felt like way small because he viewed my way of working as like unpredictable, and I gave him permission to make me feel small. And it wasn't until I was on a trip for work at a conference, I remember being on a run after finishing that book, making the decision, I'm not going to let him make me feel small just because he lives differently than I and he sees me and sees the world differently. Who knows what his story is? That book changed my life in terms of like really reclaiming my own power and reminding myself that I'm better than I think I am, right? So Daring Greatly, definitely. Another book that I found incredibly inspiring was Nelson Mandela's A Long Walk to Freedom. So Jakub, think about this. This guy lived in apartheid, South Africa, and was imprisoned for 27 years. 27 years for wanting freedom and equality in his country and spending a lot of time in solitary confinement. He was writing. Many times the guards took away his writing and just trashed it, like, hours upon hours, weeks upon weeks of work. And he came out of jail and went on to become the president of his country. And it's a book that so sweeps across all the years and all the lessons that he's learned. To learn from somebody, a luminary like that, that's walked the earth, about what it means to have leadership, what it means to have courage. I mean, that's a great book. And I could go on and on.
Amazing. I didn't read any of those two. So now I'm happy. I have 2 new books to read.
Good.
I love it. Just to piggyback on what you said about, I know, and by the way, this is not a financial advice, but this is a friendly advice. I think it was coming from you also as a friendly advice.
Yeah.
The element of going into debt for your well-being and growth, right? Yeah. So there was a moment in my life where, I realized that I started seeing more and more opportunities to go to international conferences, to masterminds, to, different experiences in the personal development world. Traveling, just simply traveling, which also is another form of growth, but obviously different. And I had at some moment a big reflection, because I had from my younger years this kind of reflex of just like, if I have this money accessible, aka even on the credit card, I'll go. But then at some point, my more mature adult brain kicked in and is like, hey, Jakub, this is not very smart. You're spending money you don't have. But then I had that conversation with myself and I'm like, I'm never gonna be 23, 26, 20, whatever. And I continued spending money I didn't have. Again, this is not advice, but this has many, many, many times changed my life, 100%. And I did continue to go to conferences that, cost $10,000 for 5 days. But the people that I met, the things that I've heard from speakers on stage, the things that I've experienced, it opened up big, big time my mind, to so many things, and I've learned obviously, but it's also just who you become through those experiences. And 100% I wouldn't be sitting here today, and we wouldn't even be having this conversation. We wouldn't be working together on the Warrior Growth Academy if it wasn't for those years. 100%.
I believe that. I believe that.
Yes.
And I can relate. I had my daughter when I was in my early 40s. I was 42, which is late. She's a bit of a miracle baby. And I was living in a McGill residence at the time. I was a mentor in res. And McGill has like a bunch of different buildings, and different mentors have lived in those buildings, including with their families. So I wasn't like blowing up the system by getting pregnant and having a baby. But somewhere along the lines, like 7 months pregnant, I get a message from McGill saying, we're killing, well, they didn't say that in the letter, but essentially what they were saying is we're ending the mentor in residence program, and you'll have to vacate the building by the end of the semester. Now, my husband and I did not plan for that financially. In fact, I had gone to a part-time position because stress is like one of the big issues or barriers to getting pregnant, especially at my age. And my husband, who was fairly new as an immigrant to Canada, was working like a shitty Dilbert job, and I encouraged him to use the time while we were living in this residence to look for a new job. So he wasn't working. So the two of us, like financially precarity, right? Like all of a sudden now we're out of a house and we're like gonna live on half a salary, like with a newborn, how are we gonna manage? And we took the bold decision, I mean, kind of crazy, I have to say, to put all our furniture in storage, and we just moved to the Caribbean. We started in Cuba, and then we moved to the Dominican, and we spent 7 months. So Annika's like first year was with us, living day to day. I had the benefits from the Canadian government as a new mom. We lived off of that. We would buy avocados and tomatoes and make our own little guacamole, and then we'd survive off of the food of la peuple. And we were so unstressed. My husband picked up painting. I was writing my book. Our daughter, a couple of hours a day, was taken care of by like a nanny, the local lady that we would eat with once in a while. And I'm convinced, because in the 0 to 1 year, a baby's brain is formed, right? That's the most brain activity you'll ever have. Because she grew up with no stress. Parents are totally stressed when they have a newborn, right? They're stretched and being pulled in all these different ways. We just lived a completely relaxed life. I'm convinced that had an impact on her. And we loved our experience so much that we came back. I would teach for a bit. My husband worked as a mover for a while, and then we went away again. So we lived for 5 months in Thailand. Annika went at 2 years old to Thai daycare. She learned sawatika. She ate Thai food when she was 2 years old. Then we came back. We loved our trip so much, we decided, okay, let's go to Morocco next. She went to a French and Arabic speaking daycare. She was happy, and she celebrated Christmas next to a mosque. It was fantastic. Then we went to Georgia for 6 months. I mean, we traveled, and it was not financially sustainable. It was not viable. We put ourselves into debt. Friends of ours that are buying not only their first home, but now they've got their cottages, now they've got the 2 cars, and then all their RSPs. We had none of that. But I'm telling you, I lived a profoundly rich life for the first 5 years with my husband and my daughter, that it defies logic how confident my daughter is and how happy my child is and how healthy she is, because she had parents that were like really present for her and living our best lives. So I hear you.
I love it. And actually that's a perfect segue to kind of, I think, if I'm not mistaken, a new field that you're entering slowly but surely in the past years, because you've been a long time in the empathy world, and you do have a class on Warrior Growth Academy about building more deep relationship through empathy per se, and also other concepts, but you also have a class on happiness.
Yeah.
So now I understand even more how it makes so much sense now that you're, let's say, jumping more into the world of happiness, and I think you're going to be also teaching about that and speaking, etc. So there's so many questions about happiness. How can someone be more happy?
Yeah, love it. So, after my PhD, because I love learning so much, I decided that I wanted to pursue a certification as a coach. So I did a personal and professional coaching certification, and it was entrenched in positive psychology. The idea that instead of looking at all our lives from the point of view of what's not working, which is what, psychologists of the past have looked at, like all our mental illnesses, all our hang-ups, all our insecurities, all our chronic issues. Positive psychology looks at what allows us to flourish, what allows us to live our best life, right? So this opened a door for me where it was like, oh, if I focus on what I want and what can happen to allow my life to open up and flourish, I can make that happen. And so much of what we do in our lives is we have thoughts and we believe our thoughts. And so many of our thoughts are limiting belief systems, right? So all the different conferences you attended, probably what came across over and over again is what you think is what limits you. If you want to think big, and then big comes to you, right? I've lost my train of thought.
You're what?
But are we allowed to do these stops, right? Yeah. Okay. So I've lost my train of thought. What was your question?
Happiness.
Happiness. Okay. Yeah. Okay.
Limiting beliefs. Limiting beliefs, happiness.
So researchers who study our happiness have come to the realization that we all have a baseline of happiness. And that's due to genetics and some of the experiences that we've had as a kid and the way our neural connections were formed. And they say, because they've studied this, people who win a lottery, for example, or who are in a massive car accident and lose a limb, in about a year or less, they'll come to the same level of happiness. So if you think about that, like something amazing could happen to you and you'll land back at happiness. Something terrible could happen to you and you'll land at the same level of happiness. So what does that mean? Does it mean like you're fixed at that level of happiness forever? What if you're not happy with your level of happiness? Like, is there something you could do about it? Well, positive psychology says absolutely yes. And that's what the course is about like all the different ways, strategies, interventions that you can adopt on a regular basis and practice to actually elevate your baseline of happiness. And you could take that through the roof. Like it never has to end. You can always be a little bit happier. I think that's so hopeful that you can do that.
It is. And I think it's beautiful, especially because obviously I've heard your class, and it's also a subject that I've been very interested for many years. So I've been also reading and researching that, but it's really beautiful, especially in the world, and I don't want to sound all cynic or negative, but in a world that promises you, in a way, happiness through things.
Yeah.
Where if you look at just a little bit of science and studies, it's literally a lie. It's literally something that doesn't have any impact on neither your baseline. There might be a little quick shot of dopamine because you open up the box of your new Gucci bag.
Yeah.
But literally the next day, 2 days later, you're back at the same spot. So you just spent money and maybe even time going to the store, and that time could have been invested in something that raises your baseline and that builds up and just keeps on growing.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's not like I'm against hedonic happiness. Like, enjoy the stuff that is delicious, enjoy good sex, enjoy, something that's fun to do in the moment, right? Like, that's fine. We have that capacity and we should take advantage of pleasure. But I think the mystics and sages and luminaries of the world, whether it's in a religious tradition or if it's in philosophy, going back across time and no matter where you look on the planet, they come to the same conclusion that people want to live purposeful lives with meaning. And that's an investment in self and an investment in others. And that's, I think, that's a missing message somehow in our society.
Absolutely, but that's why we exist.
Yeah.
That's the message we want to spread.
Yeah.
Anita, I think we could talk for hours about this, but I'm super happy that you did those 2 classes because you explain all those things, perfectly and also in a very interesting way. So thank you for being with me today. Make sure to check out those 2 classes, supercharging your relationships and also creating that baseline of happiness that can go through the roof, and actually there's no limits. Make sure to also subscribe to not miss any of those incredible conversations. I'll see you at the next one.